Hey everyone, and welcome to the second video in which I want to talk about the relevance of Catcher and give you a little short personal review of the novel. I think the relevance starts with the opening of Catcher, and that is the following passage. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born, and what my lousy childhood was like, and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me, and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it, if you want to know the truth. I think this already implies the uniqueness of what is going to follow. We're not just going to get the typical autobiographical style that we got with Charles Dickens in The Personal History, Adventures, Experience and Observation of David Copperfield, the younger of Blunderstone Rookery, which he never meant to publish on any account, also commonly known as David Copperfield. Holden really rejects this kind of classical narration, and while I don't like to link back to authorial intention, I do think this has to do with Salinger's personal aversion to descriptive writing. And this he made clear to one of his former girlfriends, Leela Hadley. She says that he knew that I intended to write a travel book, and he was scathing about that. He said he was against all descriptive writing. He couldn't see the separateness of things, he said, so why bother to describe them? Another reason why this was so relevant is the role that it played in psychoanalysis. Anna Freud, the daughter of Sigmund Freud, who almost single-handedly founded child psychoanalysis, said that many of her patients were influenced by the novel insofar that they would adapt a similar worldview and even a similar language. In the following quote, she describes the appeal of Holden Caulfield. She says, "Holden has been very much in the thoughts of many of the adolescents I've seen in analysis. He's known in England as well as here in the United States, and when he comes up in psychoanalytic sessions, I have thought to myself, yes, I know this Holden Caulfield very well indeed. He's everyone's adolescent boy or young man. He's trying to figure out what's important, who's important to him, and why. He's also trying to figure out himself and learn what causes his moodiness and his loneliness, a big order for anyone, even those of us who haven't been adolescents for a few decades." The book was also banned from high school reading lists at the time, mostly because of its profane language, but it also showed a very realistic portrayal of the post-war situation, and it also showed a sort of disappointment in American society, which probably contributed to the censoring and the banning of the book as much as the use of the language did. Holden is clearly a lot more than just a fictional character. He's a representation of contemporary youth, of the post-war disillusionment and this lost boy mentality that teenagers were facing at that time. And the character is so well written that I find it really surpasses the zeitgeist, and it is still a very relevant character today. Of course, the downsides of this very well-written character and the fact that it is so identifiable is of course that there is a risk of extreme over-identification with the character. And I think we all know the examples of extreme over-identification, as was the case for John Hinckley, who attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan in 1981. He said that he was inspired by Catcher, but of course I think the most well-known example of over-identification with Holden Caulfield is Mark David Chapman. Mark David Chapman was carrying two things with him when he shot and killed John Lennon. One was his gun, and the other was a copy of The Catcher in the Rye. On the flyleaf of his copy of Catcher, he had written, "This is my statement," and signed it with Holden Caulfield. At his trial, he cited one of the most famous passages from Catcher, which I cited in the previous video, as his sole justification for the murder. And of course, we can assign blame to the author for cases like this, and of course Catcher is not the sole reason that these people commit such crimes, but it does make me wonder if the case of identification would have been as extreme if Salinger had, for example, a third-person narrator in Catcher in the Rye. So all this goes to show, I believe, the importance of literature, the importance of a good story, and of the right narrative voice. What I find so special about the novel is the use of skaz narration. This is a special kind of technique that is derived from the Russian formalist stylistics, and it implies a literary style imitating oral monologue, including its articulation, mimicry, and sound gestures. This technique is mostly known to focus on the reader instead of the protagonist. The story is said to be a sort of monologue, and the reader kind of enters into it. The story seems more like a spontaneous narration, like you would get from a talkative stranger or an acquaintance or a close friend. And what's very common for this technique is that the reader is addressed with you. David Lodge popularized the term skaz recently, and he also explains that we don't so much read it as listen to it. And that is definitely true for Catcher. We find the words hear much more than we would find read, or tell much more than we would find write. It has an amazing flow to it, and that is because of this speech instead of written language that it has. I hope you enjoyed this little video about the relevance. Leave comments if you have anything to add, or if you have any questions, or if you want to make any corrections to what I just said, because of course this is all just my personal opinion and the research that I've done, and I'm sure there's a lot more to be said about Catcher. So leave me a comment if you have anything to add. I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the last video in which I talk about the narrative voice and the evolution of Catcher, and then we can see how what I mentioned now with the extreme over-identification, how that might not have been an issue at first. Yes, exciting things will be revealed in the third and last video. So check that out, and I hope to see you there. Peace out!